But how do you transfer from someone agreeing with what you say, then the presidential election comes around, and they don't quite, the candidates don't quite say the same things as you say, and that the ordinary person agrees with. So they say, well, I agree with John Denver, but those folks in Washington probably know. I mean, they have the expertise, they've got the advices,
well,
they've got all the books.
That's the assumption that we live under. You know, especially in a democratic society, we expect these people to be our leaders. And we forget sometimes that politics was a tool that we created for our ability to deal with one another, to have relations between different countries, different societies, to have all the different aspects of life and people that there are be represented in a system that can handle the business, you know. What the government ought to do is pick up the streets, clean the garbage, make sure the city's running and the buses are going, and like that. But more and more we're at a time when we need people to make sure that the world works, you see, and that people can have a voice in how we're spending our money, and that it goes to what my friend Buckminster Fuller called livingry, not weaponry. And as you begin to put that out there and people respond to it, then I think the next thing that happens is they have to see that being demonstrated someplace. And hopefully they'll see it demonstrated in my life or in your life, the kind of things that you do here on this program, the kinds of subjects that you bring up to your audience, to your listeners out there, the kinds of things that you talk about here that every once in a while somebody says, God, you know, I never thought about that, but I want to take a look at that. Yes. And pretty soon after you take a look, you're going to say, I want to find out what I can do. It's like the whole thing that happened last year with the hunger issue. You know, I've been involved with the hunger issue for over 15 years. I served on a presidential commission in the United States studying hunger in the world. Our commission report said that the only thing that stands between us and the end of hunger is the political will to do something about it. Now, I say it a little bit differently. I think that what is required is the popular will, and that when it becomes the will of people like you and me, that's what makes it political. And so all of these things that happened last year, it's not the money that they raised, but the consciousness that they raised to the fact of this problem and to the possibility that there is for our ending it. Yes. Once and for all, forever.
I remember, it must have been 1970, I remember seeing you and the late Harry Chapin on a television program in New York, in fact, talking about hunger.
That's right.
Around the world. Long time back, and it's a long time changing things, isn't it?
Well, it takes a long time, you know, and all of a sudden, out of a couple little events, the whole world knows it has gotten to be a small world. And what this television camera offers us is the opportunity to speak truly to everybody on the planet. And as we begin to do that, it only brings the human family closer and closer together. And more we can experience how much there is that binds us together as a family, and how dependent we are on one another, and how much there is that each of us can do to make this a better world for everyone.
John, bear with us for a moment. We'll just take a commercial break, and we'll come back and talk again to John Denver. Back in a moment. Our special guest, we can't tell you that joke, our special guest today is John Denver. John, I wondered if you could do the impossible, if you could in fact get rid of the entourage that surrounds the president and take Ronald Reagan without his Secret Service and back to Russia where you were. What would you want to show him? Is there an indelible image or memory there that you'd say, have a look at this?
Yeah, there's a cemetery in Leningrad called Petroskovskaya Cemetery, and it is a memorial to all of the people who were lost in the Second World War. And in this cemetery are buried 650,000 people. The Soviets lost 20 million people in that war, as compared to the United States to less than 500,000. Not to diminish that loss in any way, shape, or form, but just to point out 20 million people. There's a generation missing in the Soviet Union, and it's the people the age of my parents. And so to see that, all of a sudden you start to have a little bit different perspective on the Soviet, almost, you know, some people would call it a paranoia. They are a patriotic people. They love their country. When I'd take him for a walk at midnight into Red Square, which I was privileged to do the first night I was in the Soviet Union, and go stand there. And it feels exactly like I felt when I walked the streets of Washington and walked by the Capitol at midnight. Here is a symbol of a people's country, of their history, of their heritage, of their people. And they're patriotic just as you and I are. And they want peace just as you and I do. They want their children to grow up in a clean and a healthy world and have the opportunity to make their own way, just like you and I do. Now, one of these days, the politicians have got to recognize that. Dwight Eisenhower once said, one of these days, politicians are going to have to move over and let people have what they want. And so that's what we're at today. And it's just recognizing truly that we all want the same things and that what we want is achievable. And pretty soon that will be reflected not only in our lives, but in the lives of the politicians who represent us. And we can create that world that we dream about.
It's very interesting. You know, looking through your file on the clips, I add up about 26 organisations from Save the Whales to Save the Children right on through that you've been involved with. And yet you're still pretty apolitical. You haven't been tied up with, as Warren Beatty has with the Democratic Party or various people with the Republican Party. You've stayed away from party politics.
I'm not a great fan of politics. And I think that there's a much greater you know, when you join a political party, for instance, you are a Republican. You know, we do so much in the world to separate ourselves one from the other. Whether you are a Republican or a Democrat or a socialist or a communist or a Catholic or a Jew or American or Australian or a woman or a man or black or white, blah, 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 blah. You know, what I want to do with my music and with everything I do in my life is to bring people together, to break down those fences, those things that separate us, not to lose them, you know, but to find what the kernels are in whatever the subject is that can bring us together. That's the way that I choose to work, and I don't think that you can do that in politics.
I get the impression as well, and no offence to Sting at all, but he has said in the past that he's very selfish about his performance and about his writing, that he does it for himself. I get the impression, having seen many of your concerts, that you really love performing for people, but the difference is that that's what gives you a buzz.
It is simply my favorite thing in the world is to sing for people, and I don't believe Sting when he said that.
You don't?
No, I don't think so. I think that it's, you know, it's sometimes, and especially with the kind of success that he's having right now, it's good to sort of step away from it a little bit, you know, and that's not all that big a deal. But I know that to take the kind of energy and commitment it takes to do your job, traveling all over the world to live the kind of life that we do, takes a very, very strong commitment, and it takes really believing that what you're doing is about something and is worth something. I don't think you could do it without that, and I really see that not only in his eyes, but I hear it in his songs.
Are you a performance addict, as he claims to be? Are you addicted to performing?
No, I don't think that's the case. I'm addicted to singing. And singing and performing, you know, it's like when I go camping with my friends in the Rocky Mountains, I always take a guitar with me, and I have a little backpacking raft that blows up, you can hold 2 people. And so after camping out and having dinner over here by the fire, I'll take my little raft and go out in the middle of some high alpine lake with my guitar, and I sing for the stars and the mountains, and I think they are my best performances. So.
Do they applaud?
I've had various and sundry voices start to sing with me out there.
Can you articulate, can you say what that buzz is then? No, you just said that it's not performing, it's singing. I mean, why is it so splendid?
Well, there is something about sound. You know, it's like the first thing that occurs to me about sound is in the beginning was the word. And then there's a whole lot of other, perhaps more esoteric disciplines that give articulation to what sound is and how it works and how it manifests itself in our lives. So there is something about singing, and miracles can occur through sound, and I've had that experience. And to be able to sing for people and to hear them singing with you is just, it's wonderful.
What do you mean by miracles?
Well, for instance, there was a family in Wisconsin, in Appleton, Wisconsin, and the mother had gone through a nervous breakdown, and in fact had become almost catatonic and was in a hospital. And she had been there for about a year and got to the point where the doctors allowed her to go visit her family on weekends. And on one particular weekend, they were having dinner at a friend's house, and after dinner they started playing my greatest hits album, I believe. And all of a sudden in the process of this album, sitting and listening, and the album was background music, it's not like they were listening to it, but in here talking, and she kept being drawn away to this, and all of a sudden she broke down and started crying and released all of this stuff that she had locked up inside her. And within about a month of that particular incident, she was back at home living with her family, living a very productive life. And so her husband wrote and told me about this, convinced that what had unlocked that for her was my music. So, and things like that.
How do you feel about that?
I think it's wonderful. You know, like Mr. Sting, you can start to get pretty caught up in that. When people write to you and say that they're using your song in their wedding, or they're having your music played when their children are being born, those are incredible moments in an individual's life. and to be allowed to participate in that, in a sense, that's really very, very wonderful. There's something special going on there. But rather than think that it's me, what I choose to recognize is that it's something that happens to be happening through me. The gift that I have, the talent that I have, the voice that I have, the songs that I've written, all of these things are something for which I'm merely like the pencil between myself and the paper, between that thing, that spirit that binds us all together as human beings, and these ears that hear. I'm in sort of an instrument, and I like that, and it helps keep me straight, you know.
Well, I said to John in the break that since we spoke to you last time on the satellite, you mentioned that you'd love to see the Australian bush and also do some flying here, and we had lots of letters from people saying, I live on a station, as we call them. I live out in the bush. We've got X thousand acres here. We'd love to have John out there. The letters have poured in. Also, one guy who wants you to fly around with the Red Baron over Sydney here said you want some real flying.
It's a deal. Well, yesterday in Perth, the same thing happened from someone who'd seen the show that I was on. And so they invited me to go out to the Royal Aero Club in Perth, and I got a chance to fly a Tiger Moth, which is a very old open cockpit biplane, and I had the most wonderful morning, and so it was because of that opportunity in talking with you, and if it comes up again, I'm ready.
Well, it's a Tiger Moth in Sydney. In fact, it's called the Red Baron, and this guy said, just put him in touch with us and we'll show him some flying.
Well, I happen to be checked out now, so I'm ready.
All right, great. Well, in fact, you're coming back to Sydney. We'll give some dates. Brisbane tomorrow night. Canberra on the 11th, Launceston the 13th, Adelaide 15 and 16. Sydney, the third show has been released today, so that's April 20, 21 and 22nd in Sydney. Melbourne 23 and 24. We have, as I say, if you look in the newspapers, if you've missed all that, John Denver's coming your way, and we hope that we might be able to talk to you when you come back to Sydney again, John, if you have time, and maybe even bring the guitar this time and pretend there's a campfire there and you're in the Rocky Mountains and sing for us.
Be my pleasure. If I haven't been flying all night, maybe I'll have a voice to sing for you.
Fantastic. Please thank John Denver. It's a delight to talk to you. I can only pass on how pleased you have made a lot of people, I'm sure, in Australia with things you've said today and talking to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.